Hi guys, here we go again. Question time going out of its way to platform Tory charlatans. And the crooks and fibbers don't get much bigger than Boris Johnson's sycophant Nadine Dorries. Nadine was speaking here on a panel on the subject of the NHS and the struggles it's facing. Now, as a Tory, it's in her DNA to blame everyone else, and she did exactly that. First the Labour Party when it was in opposition, and then the NHS itself. This is so frigging frustrating.
So in 1987, we had 250,000 hospital beds and we had a population of 55 million. Today, we only have 140,000 hospital beds and we have a population of 68 million.
So why do you think the Conservatives didn't open more hospitals and put more beds in then?
We actually came in 2019 with a manifesto to open 20 new hospitals, which were opposed at every stage by the Labour opposite when they were in opposition at that time.
Okay. You actually promised to build 40 new hospitals, not 20. Boris Johnson, remember the 40 new hospitals. So, the fibbing has begun pretty early in this segment. But you keep coming back to this point that it was the Labour Party's fault. You and your party had a massive majority. Boris Johnson won a massive majority in 2019. You can't blame the Labour Party. You had a majority. This is what the Tories were doing throughout from 2019 to today. Oh, we couldn't do anything because Labour were blocking us. Labour were voting against us. No, Labour could not block any policy because you had a majority. She understands that, or if she doesn't, she's pretty dumb. When it came to the House of Lords, the same thing. So you can't say, oh, we couldn't get our policies through because of Labour. No, you had a massive majority in 2019. You promised to build 40 new hospitals. You didn't build them.
They weren't new hospitals and they weren't hospitals.
But can I just say, some of them were new hospitals, Chris, and some of them were extensions to existing hospitals, which would have increased the number of hospital beds. But there are, if I can just get to the substantive point, there are a number of issues. One is workforce. And we have far fewer people today who actually even want to train as nurses, and workforce is a massive issue.
Yes, so you supported Brexit, which resulted in the ending of freedom of movement, which made it difficult for the NHS to access the workers it needed. And your party decided we're not going to support bursaries to get nurses into the NHS. And now you're saying we didn't have enough staff.
And one of the things Wes Streeting will have discovered as soon as he walked in to the Department of Health was that he has almost no levers of power that he can pull over the NHS. Because years ago in 2012, we made the NHS almost independent to move it away from government so that it wasn't a government football, so that it wasn't a political football.
Are you talking about the Andrew Lansley reforms?
The Lansley reforms, yeah. I do want to because it's a long time ago and people may not remember them, but 2012 we brought in the Lansley reforms, and that gave the NHS almost total independence. So he has that, which is the reason why this new incoming Labour government have just given them a huge dollop of money with no deliverables, no answerable terms in which they can spend that money. We just dropped it into the black hole of the NHS. And I'm afraid the NHS, that is one of the problems. Money just sinks into the NHS with very little say for the government over where it's spent and what is delivered for that money. And that is fundamentally a deep...
Oh my goodness. How much money is going into the private sector? See, once again, blaming everyone else. First of all, blaming the Labour Party when they were in opposition, when they actually couldn't do anything about your policies. And now blaming the NHS. Oh, we gave the NHS independence, but the money is disappearing. So much of the money going into the NHS goes into the private sector. That was your political decision when you were in charge for 14 years. You can't turn around now and say, oh, look, the NHS is a disaster. You made it that way. You took a political decision, an ideological decision. We're going to run it into the ground. We're not going to fund it sufficiently. And whatever funding it does receive, a lot of it is going to go into the private sector, which is more expensive and damages productivity. And now you're complaining that it's not productive. You're complaining it doesn't have the staff. It doesn't have the staff because of Brexit and because of your policies. This is so frustrating. And once again, she's on Question Time. Why the heck is she on Question Time? What is the point in having her on a show? She's not adding anything to the discussion. She's actually taking away from the discussion. And at the very beginning, she mentioned how the population had changed. The Conservatives were in power for about 10 years in the last few decades. And then they were in power again after Tony Blair and Gordon Brown for 14 years. And in none of that time, they decided, actually, we need to increase the size of the NHS. We need to have a bigger workforce because the population is increasing. It's not like the population went from 50 million to 65 million in a day or in a year. It gradually increased. And over that time, you should have put in place measures. But you decided not to. You decided, let's go down the road of austerity. Let's go down the road of cutting public services. Let's try and force the NHS to rely more on the private sector. These charlatans should go away. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.